is to recognize that mental health is not just a rich person issue. Mental health impacts people of all income classes. Our core objective as our mental health company is to increase the accessibility of mental health care. 95% of our patients are paying via insurance. Only 5% are cash pay. You look at my surrounding market, 75% of therapists don't even take insurance. So we're trying to serve the masses. We are not getting as much profit as the ones that are just doing cash pay, but we're okay with that because I'm a big believer in a lot of those companies that do a profit for a purpose. So yes, do we need to make money? 100%. Every company needs to make money, or else you can't have the therapists and the people there in place to actually help, but we don't need to be greedy.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what it is that you do. What is your offer?
Yeah. Where do you want me to start? And like, do you even want me to actually, since I know this is more the podcast format, it's not like sharing a deck would be worthwhile. So I'm going to verbalize things. Um, and I'll ask just like the general question, because this is the number one question I ask a lot of the business owners or the HR execs that I work for or work with. Is like, when is the last time you were able to increase your profits while increasing your employee benefits? That's that's pretty much the question I ask them. And historically speaking, they will be able to say, I can't remember. Because truthfully, those generally work in different directions.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like it goes against the laws of nature somehow.
The laws of nature, indeed. And like, again, I won't pull up a deck or anything like that, but I always try to share with people just like, do you actually truthfully understand the tax code and how the IRS has structured various things? But like, I showed them like images of the IRS loves small business, and most people just laugh at that as like, oh, that's BS. Like, that's not actually true. But honestly, it might sound crazy. It actually is true. And it just helps people if they really understood what the IRS has put in place and that the US tax code is actually written in the favor of business owners and entrepreneurs. I think it's Tom Wheelwright has a really good book out there. In fact, I keep it next to my desk. That's how passionate I am about it. So you can see that one. Tax free wealth strategy. If people don't know who Tom Wheelwright is, if they've ever read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, he's the CPA of Rich Dad Poor Dad. So he probably has an idea of what the hell he's talking about when he's talking about taxes. And based on that, it's just really helpful for people to understand, okay, if the 95% of the tax code is written in our favor, then maybe I just don't know where I'm looking. I help them figure out where to go looking. And so that's really the best way to describe it of I want owners to be able to find the money that they rightfully deserve while being able to pay their employees more, because the most important asset for any company is their people. And the most successful companies are very good at attracting talent, retaining talent, and increasing their profitability. That's what I do. So hopefully that gives a quick top line overview.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, can you talk about starting Anthem Capital? Like, where did the idea come from? What was the observed need that you saw? And could you just put some context, shed some light on that?
Yeah, so to create some clarity here, Anthem Capital is much more real estate oriented. So Anthem Capital, we're really focused on multifamily type investments out in the southern belt of the United States, and we can certainly talk more about that. My guess is you probably want to talk more about the wellness for the workforce piece. That was the ability for us to increase profits for companies while increasing the employee benefits. But I'm happy to talk more about Anthem Capital if you want me to. But you just tell me.
Sure. Well, basically, I'd like to understand more about your entrepreneurial journey as well. But if you want to stick on the topic already at hand, I'm happy to do both.
Ooh, man. All right. Well, let's start. I'll take a step back. I'll give people the rough introduction of who is Dan Cosgrove. Besides, the sweet sounding voice. So
This is a good
background.
voice.
Oh, thank you. I got to work on this. But yeah, so the background is I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio. I live out here in Boston, Massachusetts. I was a corporate guy for most of my life, and I spent a lot of years at Procter and Gamble. They sold me to Berkshire Hathaway, where I then worked at Duracell. I then got poached by Nike and became the head of brand strategy and planning at Converse. So that was my corporate experience. But I always I had set a goal. I went to University of Richmond, same place as Little Dicky, and or Dave from his show on FX. But I think that's probably our claim is we have Dave or Little Dicky coming from Richmond. But nonetheless, I'd set a goal 10 years after graduation to be able to break away and become much more entrepreneurial. It's 10 years and 1 month that I took a package from Nike to become much more entrepreneurial. So my first foray was really into real estate because I'd been passively investing in real estate for about 5 years leading up to me breaking away from the corporate world. So fortunately, I'd been able to make good money in real estate. But that's not the only thing I do. Real estate is a good vehicle to have. As many people know, the current market for real estate over the last 2 years has been pretty tough. So I'm glad it's not my only hat. I then started getting involved more in business ownership. And one of the things that piqued my interest was that during COVID, being the head of brand strategy and planning, you try to get into the mind of the consumer a lot. In the mind of the consumer, might come as no surprise, during COVID was anxiety and depression were at all-time highs, and people were searching for a sense of being oneself. So we would create some really good marketing strategies and tactics and campaigns around the element of speaking to people and emotionally connecting with them. And guess what? It sold a lot of shoes. But at the end of the day, it felt kind of disingenuous because we weren't really helping anybody solve their mental health. We were helping them buy shoes. So I wanted to find a way that I could create a more, let's just say, meaningful impact in the community around me. I fully recognize my limitations. My wife will be the first one to tell you it. I can't sit in a room and listen to somebody talk to me about their feelings. So I'd not be a good therapist, psychologist, or psychiatrist. I can definitely do business though. And so I found a way to open up a mental health company and hire all these wonderful therapists to be able to help the people in our community. And so we provide affordable access to mental health care. So that's another arm of where I became much more entrepreneurial. And out of that entrepreneurial experience, I actually figured out that there is a ton of knowledge that is available, but most people are unaware of for the small to medium sized businesses. That's what led me to Wellness for the Workforce. Because I myself, as a business owner, especially in your initial first 12 months when you're just trying to survive, you're looking for anything to increase your profitability. And so I was doing the same thing. And we knew during COVID, Paycheck Protection Program or PPP or the ERC, Employee Retention Credits, those were huge and very popular for people at that time. Well, guess what? Both those programs have been sunset. So it's not like that's available anymore. And so I just kept on Googling. It's like, okay, there's got to be a way to find this. And sure enough, I ended up finding it on like page 700 of the 900 page amendment of the Affordable Care Act from 2016, 2017, in which they talked about wellness programs and how if companies put those in place, they could actually increase their profits by through a tax savings vehicle while increasing their employee benefits. It's like, okay, I want to put this in place for my employees because my employees are my most important thing. And so I first tested it out on myself, my family, my employees, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is huge. And so I ended up becoming an enterprise partner of one of the biggest benefits provider in the United States. So that's what has hopefully led us here now to today. And I've recognized I'm getting a lot of sun coming in from this window, so I'll close this.
Well, I appreciate your background. That is impressive and also a little interesting too, like some kind of I don't know, contradictions almost. Like you care about people, but you can't listen to them talk about their feelings. You feel called to do something, let's say more, for lack of a better word. But you do have a pretty like eyebrow raising resume there with some of the brands that you've worked for and some of the positions that you've held. So I don't want to take anything away from what you're currently doing at the moment, but I would like to kind of go back and unpack a little bit about what it's like being atop some of these mountains that you've been a part of with Procter and Gamble, with Nike, etc. So I'm kind of curious. Maybe I'll just start with Duracell because that came kind of unexpected. Like batteries, what's Duracell's like market size, like a relative percentage of the battery market? Do you know?
I mean, they're still probably sitting around 40 to 50%.
Yeah, they're
Um,
massive.
they are massive. That's correct. Yeah, there's really only two players in the marketplace. You've got Energizer and Duracell. Um, and I mean, this is entirely tangent, but do you know that it's the Duracell bunny in all other parts of the world except for America?
I did not know that.
Okay. This is a good business school case of why you need lawyers. So many moons ago, it was in the US, the Duracell bunny. The Duracell legal team forgot to renew the trademark.
Oh
The
my.
very next day, Energizer snapped it up. And so there's a really good way for us to figure out if the Duracell products being sold in America are illegal because the packaging will have the bunny on it. Because that's allowed in Mexico. Like, so a lot of times, if retailers are trying to get cheaper product, they're going to try and ship it across the border from Mexico. But we would know that it's illegal since it has the Duracell bunny. So now you know a fun little fact of the Duracell bunny versus the Energizer bunny.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. You've worked in a couple different industries though. Like what have
Yep.
you taken from each of these industries, from shoes to batteries? Like what do they have in let's just focus on shoes and batteries. Like what's something that they have in common?
Yeah. I'll start with the consumer packaged good because I've been very. I'm not gonna say I was based on talent. I got very lucky to be at the right place at the right time. And made the right connections to get my foot in the door at all these great companies. So I won't take anything away from it. If there's people listening that are working in the corporate world, I don't hate the corporate world. It's just it wasn't something that I wanted to stick around with for the longer term. But like with P&G, incredible experience. I mean, if you look at the P&G alumni, they go on to become the CEOs of all the major companies seemingly in the world. So it was a great training ground. And my goal there was to try and just sap up, soak in as much information as possible from them. P&G is very, let's say, process oriented. You have seemingly a process for everything, even to like tie your shoe or go to the bathroom. Like that's how process oriented they are. That's a beauty and a curse because like it made us be a pretty streamlined process and be able to best serve, the end consumer. Where it was frustrating is because it kind of restricted you on your ability to be creative with concepts that might be newer or quicker to market and things along those lines. And so that was the frustration, which on the Nike side, polar opposite. I mean, love Nike to death. They didn't have a lot of processes in place, even though they are the biggest food or shoe and apparel company in the world. They didn't have a ton of processes. A lot more decisions were made on emotion versus data. Whereas P&G, everything was data oriented. They were the first ones. I mean, they brought data to grocery stores. Now the grocery stores don't know the data, and then P&G pretty much brought data to the internet of recognizing how to track your marketing dollars online. They were one of the first ones to create multi-touch attribution. Now everybody does that. So like you go from one pendulum all the way over to the other side with Nike, where we were just putting in place some of the multi-touch attribution to figure out how our marketing dollars work. We weren't really doing ad testing to figure out if consumers are going to respond to this positively or not. So entirely different perspective. I appreciate both of them because clearly it works for both companies. Um, but yeah, it's good to see how things are done through two entirely different lenses.
Absolutely. That's interesting to hear about Nike. I it reminds me like I don't know if it's an apt analogy, but like kind of the thinking fast, thinking slow kind
Yep.
of idea where each would have their use, like your instincts, your emotional kind of pull, and then also the analytical numbers based data approach. What has that looked like for you? Like going into those organizations, what does an emotional decision led business look like versus a data led decision? And can you touch on maybe some obvious strengths or weaknesses to either approach?
Yeah. So a data led one, I would say, is a longer timeline because you want to get that data, you get your consensus, and then you make your move. An emotion led one, I'd say, is more off the cuff. I mean, you see a lot of those Nike commercials. Don't get me wrong; they plan these things in advance, but like in the Olympics, let's assume Novak Djokovic wins and he's sponsored by Nike. Well, right after he wins, there's going to be a commercial there celebrating his latest title, et cetera, et cetera. So like they are more present in, let's say, everyday activities versus like a PNG or something like that. That's planned. If it's not planned, it's not completed. And so it's just recognizing when you want to be relevant in today's life or just relevant on kind of this everyday meaning, but nothing that sparks excitement. Like Nike does a new shoe drop every week. People get excited by new shoes. P&G's not dropping a new brand every week. P&G's dropping a new brand maybe once every 5 years. So it's just a little different approach.
Yeah, cruise ships versus jet skis, kind of.
Exactly. Exactly.
So is there a way to hybridize that? Is there a way to do both? Is that what maybe Nike was trying to do?
I think they're in the process of trying to do that. You can look at their stock price; it's not great right now, but there's always a change, and for any major company, they're going to go through it. My former boss, I think the world of him. He had a great line that I'm going to steal from him. He said, "You can make yourself obsolete, or you can become obsolete." I'd rather make myself obsolete. And by making yourself obsolete, it means you're innovating and continuing to think of new concepts. If you become obsolete, you're kind of like the Kodaks of the world. And so that's something that has really stuck with me long after it. Of yeah, I need processes in place, but I need to also have kind of a growth mindset of not being fixed on like, well, this is how it's always been done. Because if I just think it's always been done that way, hmm, we're going to be out of luck.
Yeah, there's the really interesting contradictions in life, and I think that's one of them. Also, I think in the terms of like being a coach or teacher, your
Yep.
goal is not to be needed anymore, and in so doing, you actually become better at your job, and then you wind up getting more work. So it's kind of interesting. Could we talk about like what you're doing as far as making mental health more affordable?
Yeah, so goes back to the Affordable Care Act, where or Obamacare, as a lot of people know it as, but the invested effort was to recognize that mental health is not just a rich person issue. Mental health impacts people of all income classes, and for the longest time, insurance companies didn't have to cover mental health treatment. Affordable Care Act pretty much changed that. Now, people just think, well, every person's going to carry insurance now because mental health is covered. They don't know behind the scenes. It is, I'll be transparent. It's a pain in the ass to get credentialed with insurance companies and get paid a fair reimbursement. And I can't disclose what those reimbursements are legally, but I can just tell you, I would make a lot, 2x more money if I just focused on treating rich people issues and getting paid cash instead of being paid by insurance companies. So, our core objective as our mental health company is to increase the accessibility of mental health care. 95% of our patients are paying via insurance, only 5% are cash pay. You look at my surrounding market, 75% of therapists don't even take insurance. There's a big gap there. So we're trying to serve the masses. We are not getting as much profit as the ones that are just doing cash pay, but we're okay with that because I'm a big believer in a lot of those companies that do a profit for a purpose. So, yes, do we need to make money? 100%. Every company needs to make money, or else you can't have the therapists and the people there in place to actually help. But we don't need to be greedy. And so that's really our approach: is take as much of the insurance payments as possible to be able to help as many of the people out there that can't afford maybe $250 a session, but they could probably afford a $25 copay for a session. And so that's how we try to do it.
Yeah, that's great. You're involved in a few large initiatives. In how could you explain how your kind of strategy, how did you develop it in terms of where you split your time? Is there some crossover, like the chess grandmasters where like each move they make, it's kind of like either way they have some kind of ROI on that? Is that kind of how you think too with how you spend your time?
100%. Gosh, you know what? I love having a desk with books because I already hit you with the tax free wealth strategy. This one, though, Power of One More, Ed Milet, love this one. And so to answer your question, in it, Ed Milet talks a lot about how the best people live 3 days in one. They kind of chunk their days and allocate time properly, and they try to win each one of those things. Kind of like you try to win each quarter in basketball. And so for me, yes, I do real estate. I'm a business owner. I'm creating business benefits for business owners. And yes, I also am a financial strategist. So I do insurance, I do executive bonus plans, things like that also help these business owners. So a lot of the time, the old saying, you kill two birds with one stone. I might have a conversation with a business owner that is of course, looking to always increase their profits. I can help them a number of ways. One, they might want to just be a passive investor in some of our real estate deals, which, historically we've had about a 25% IRR on our deals. So it's pretty good. Or they might be interested in increasing their employee benefits and increasing their profits, in which case I can help them with wellness for the workforce. Or they might be interested in creating an executive bonus plan for some of their key talent, or even for themselves to minimize the tax implications while also, of course, growing profitably. So for me, the area that I play in, it's kind of like a flywheel. One feeds the other. And so that way I'm not having four different conversations with four different people. I'm having four conversations with one person. And there's probably at least going to be two, maybe three things in each one of those times that I talk with that person that they're going to want to leverage it. So that's how I best maximize my time is I keep my network focused on that kind of niche of business owners that are looking to grow. And grow is a pretty broad term.
That's really helpful. And I think that's kind of how I like to approach things as well, because you address a broader kind of audience, I suppose. But then you have the segmentation in there. And it is, like you say, a flywheel or a virtuous cycle where each one kind of strengthens the other. And I'm sure there's a lot of growth on your side as well, being exposed to all the different needs and the evolutions of each market, let's say. So, what are you looking to do now that you've not yet done?
I mean, truthfully, I want to make sure that our mental health company can grow. I want to be because um, we do transparent pay for our therapists, and we know in the corporate world, transparent pay doesn't really exist. So that's a differentiator for us. We really focus on having our employees, employee number one all the way to employee number 100. They know what the other person's making, and they have just as much incentive or motivation to make that same amount. And so, if I can take away the majority of the headaches for my therapists out there, then that means they can touch and improve the lives of more people in the community. And that helps serve a broader cause of addressing mental health issues. So, again, I don't want my employees to burn out. I want to grow to 200, 300 person organization. The only way you can do that is if you take care of your people. And so that's really my focus. I want to make sure I take care of them. But we know I'm not a therapist, so I can't run that day to day. What I can continue to help doing though is I can keep driving these other conversations with business owners to make sure they're taking care of their own employees. And um, so I want to be able to help more companies put programs in place where they're going to increase their profits and increase their employee benefits. Because show me a person that doesn't want that. We got like an 85% close rate for a reason. Once people understand the U.S. tax code, it's pretty easy to say, "Oh yeah, this makes sense. I want to do it." It's just more so a confused mind says no, and I have to overcome those barriers of even letting these people have that conversation, being vulnerable enough of saying, "Oh, I didn't know this." Most people, when they're business owners, just like, "Oh, I know everything." And that's the biggest challenge is trying to just get in front of the business owners and helping them understand that, hey, it's okay to not know everything. I still don't know a lot of things. And I will continue to not know a lot of things, but every single day is a learning day. And so that's really my two things. I want my therapists to continue to grow. I want them to continue to be able to serve people in the community. And if we like, ideally, if I can grow to 200 people, then that means at a bare minimum, oh gosh, I'd be saving or helping 2,000 lives a month, um, probably 20,000 lives a month on the top side. Like that's meaningful for me. Is that 2 million? No. But, I at least want to be able to create some form of an impact on that end. And on the same way as I try to help business owners, if I can just help a collective group of maybe 2,000 employees every single month, well, times 12 months, I've helped 24,000 employees get a better income, and I've helped those business owners treat their employees better. And that can create a multiplier effect, not just in year one, but for the next decade, for the next lifetime. So that's kind of like how I want to approach it is leaving behind a legacy. And you only leave a legacy if you're actually providing value to people.
Right. Couple of takeaways I got from that. Confused mind says no. And it seems like you're leveraging existing systems. So you've got the tax code that's helping both with growing employers' profitability while helping their employees, which is a win-win. Also using the ACA to help with mental health access for people who might think, perhaps incorrectly, that they can't afford it. Are there any other like systems or needs that you think are untapped or that like people are missing?
I mean, there's so many things untapped. Um, but I mean, realistically, Dan Cosgrove doesn't have the bandwidth to
I
untap all the things. I think I
didn't
got
mean to suggest you weren't doing enough.
um, I mean, hell, in the real estate space, there's a ton of opportunity for people to make really good money by creating affordable housing. A lot of people just focus on workforce housing and above and just premium pricing out those rents, and it makes it really cost prohibitive. Um, I'm personally working on an affordable housing project right now, like, and and it will make actually probably more money. Not to be greedy, it'll probably make me more money than any of the prior deals that we've ever had, in which we were really just doing workforce housing. So again, it goes for the concept of once you recognize that the government has a lot of programs in place, and local cities do too, of you're going to be incentivized to provide affordable housing, you can actually make good money while helping that community. It takes time. My project has taken me already 15 months and we haven't even broken ground. But there's like I said, plenty of opportunity. I'll just focus on my little flywheel where I can speak to it fluently. But people could be in R&D. There's incentives out there for them. There's things available for people if they just take the time to have an open mind and are willing to look or at least listen to those people that might be calling on them. Because guess what? Salespeople are actually important. Because if you didn't have salespeople, you would probably not be aware of the next best thing since sliced bread, right? Because if not, we're just going to keep staring at our laptop and only be doing that for the rest of the day. So yeah, that's just kind of my 2 cents.
Well, housing, mental health, and profitability of businesses sound, fairly significant. That basically is the bedrock of communities. So I think that that's great. What do you think, as you're learning more about this, what do you think is or are some of the main barriers to affordable housing being more widespread? I know homelessness is a rising concern in a lot of places, and that seems to be almost like this unsolvable problem. But yet you're saying it's very solvable. So what do you think some of those hurdles are?
Well, I mean, the government's put out some notices about it. They've recognized that some of their federally subsidized programs have a lot of barriers to entry. And so they do need to make a more streamlined process because you look at the interest rates right now. SOFR is sitting at like 5.3, primes at like 8.5%. So if you think about it from a real estate developer, if you're going to wait on the government to potentially give you some good subsidies on a project, but let's just say it's a $10 million purchase price, and now you have to wait 24 months before you can actually break ground. Well, on a $10 million purchase, if you've purchased this already before getting the permits approved and everything like that, you're carrying a heavy interest rate for 2 years straight. And that will not be able to offset no matter how strong the government incentives are. And so that's why people a lot of the times are just like, well, screw that. I'm not going to wait for the government to give me these subsidies. I'm just going to go with how I've always done it. I'm going to build this thing. It's going to take me about 9 to 12 months, and I'm going to have that ready to go. And I can still find high net worth clients that are willing to pay for it. So that's the real problem is all the new developments that go up around the country. It's not, they don't take a, they don't make a new development into a C class property. Like a C class is generally more something that looks less desirable. No, they build an A class property. So the only way you're going to get an A class property to create affordable housing is if there's some subsidy in place there, and you have to plan for that far in advance. Um, so yeah, the government has a lot of work to do there, especially if interest rates are going to stay high. Because I don't blame real estate developers; like they also have to, put food on the table. And if you're just burning through your money based on interest rates as you wait, that's really not a smart business plan.
Yeah, does seem like a challenge, but an addressable one. Thank you for sharing some light on that, and it's interesting to see your work in that space. So you recognize the value of relationships and helping people around you. You seem generous with your time and with your rewards that you gain along the way. Where does that come from? Was that something that was instilled in you in your kind of culture, or is that something that you learned somewhere else along your professional career?
Oh man, that's good. Well, I mean, I would say my parents have definitely been great role models for me. My family's been great role models, and so yeah, I would say, and now as a new dad, or a 19-month old, but still as a new dad, I have a greater appreciation for what my parents instilled in me. And then there's plenty of things I learned along the way. Another book, which I don't have it in front of me, but it really talks about the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. Um, and I recognize in my corporate years, at least in the early on stages, I was just focused on getting promoted, getting promoted, getting promoted, getting promoted. I didn't care who I had to run over in order to get promoted. Um, Short term, yeah, it got me promoted faster. Longer term, that probably burned some bridges. And when people start looking at the longer term plan, if you're just focusing on a transaction, sure, you might win for the next 1 to 3 years. Longer term, you're screwing yourself over. And I've certainly made those mistakes when, like I said, in that prior me, of viewing things much more as a transaction. I then shifted from this growth mindset of, or to this growth mindset of, I'd rather have an extra large cheese pizza that I can only eat a half of than having a medium cheese pizza that I can eat the whole thing of.
I haven't heard the pizza analogy. I heard the watermelon and the grape.
Yeah. I mean, pizza is my favorite food.
Yeah, I like
So
it.
so for me, that's why I'm much more open of giving my time and sharing in a lot of my profits with people, because I know even if I have to do the majority of the work, the most important thing might be that introduction to be able to talk to that business owner, for instance. Because especially like when you talk about tax codes and ways to leverage those savings, if you get on Google and you type in like IRS's opinion of these things, the first page is going to show that they don't like it. And it's true. Like the IRS wrote a 2023 opinion letter saying they don't like it. And when you have to overcome that barrier, and now to be clear, the IRS has since redacted that comment and have said that these wellness programs are good to go. Like I even have the IRS notice and all that stuff if people ever want to see it. But when you have to overcome those major barriers of like the IRS saying this stuff is not real, you have to really have a strong referral that says, hey, it it sounds too good to be true, but you really want to talk to this guy because it's well worth it. And so, like, yeah, the you may not know it, but you might have developed this relationship with somebody over the last 15 years. And sure, it might only take you 5 minutes to text him or email him saying you might want to talk to this guy, but you should get paid for the past 15 years of you creating that organic trust of this person being willing to now take a call from Dan Cosgrove or things like that. So that's why I'm generous with it, because I recognize that relationships are the new currency, and people deserve to be compensated for the fact of opening the door for somebody else to be able to do the work and deliver that value to that person.
Well, yeah, I think you limit yourself by your imagination, basically, when you think in the short term mindset, or the fixed mindset, as you put it. So yeah, sometimes you have to live it to see it. And it sounds like you have. So yeah, that's inspiring to see and something certainly try to remain aware of. So, talking to the entrepreneurial community out there, what's one thing that you would say to people starting their entrepreneurship journey? Maybe they're mid career, got laid off, following their dream. Maybe they're fresh out of school, but they've never been an entrepreneur before. What's something that they should keep in mind?
Well, there's a lot there. The first thing I would say is actually, we know layoffs are big in the corporate world right now. I mean, as interest rates remain high, there's going to be a lot more layoffs coming. Tech sector has been really hit hard over the last 12, 24 months. Um, and so people always say like the riskiest thing is being an entrepreneur. I would 100% disagree with that. I'd say the riskiest thing is being an employer, or sorry, an employee of an employer, because you cannot control your destiny. And I mean, sure, it sucks. Yeah, it hurts your ego if you're ever laid off. Like, feels like you're not wanted. You're kicked out of that group, right? So yeah, you can be down for a day, a week, like however long you want, but recognize that this is probably a blessing in disguise, because this is only going to create more upside for you. It's much better. Now, you do have to do good budgeting so you can manage your cash flow, but I would much rather work my ass off for free for the next 3 months and then get a $200,000 paycheck for that big moment versus work my ass off 60 to 70 hours a week and still get that $200,000 paycheck at the end of the year, but never be able to create a revenue stream that's sustainable, knowing that I do have an end date at retirement or getting fired or let go from that job. So for me, it's just kind of reframing what is really safety and security. I think it's grinding for the 12 to 36 months it might take as an early stage entrepreneur to be able to reap 100% of those benefits in the longer term.
Yeah, that's great advice. I had kind of a similar thought to people that maybe even want to stay in corporate, as you said earlier. I think the entrepreneurial mindset will still help you. Just think of how to provide value and be a little bit more agile or nimble within the organization as well.
100%. And a lot of the best companies in the world actually have like, let's say, incubators. P&G, I know we had that. Nike had like their Nike Labs. Like a lot of good companies. If you're not currently working in the kind of the more innovative area, you can always ask your HR team, see if they can get you in there. That way, it still gives you that comfort of having that corporate, job, but still being able to be more creative than what you might see on your day to day.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Dan, it's really a pleasure to talk with you and see a little bit about these massive corporations and systems that you're using for the betterment of mankind. Uh, where would you like to point people? Where can they follow what you're doing and the exciting stuff on the horizon?
Yeah, so I think the best way, honestly, to track me, man, LinkedIn is Dan Cosgrove. I think my backslash is actually find a new job or something like that for a lot of people that might be going through that transition in life. But yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. Um, Most active website is probably Wellness for the Workforce because that's where we just help a lot of business owners, and that's wellnessfortheworkforce.com. They can also email me at info at wellness for the workforce, and that will go to somebody on my team, and they'll track me down. So that is that's really the best way they can track me down. And then I'm happy to hop on a Zoom or do a phone call because I'm a big believer that the best way to solve a problem is by talking. And again, as you already know, I'm not a transactional person. I focus on relationships because that's the new currency.
Yes. Well, thank you once again, and keep it up.
Awesome, David. I appreciate it. You take care of yourself.